Welcome to the Infill Podcast, where we interview the most interesting members of the 3D printing and maker communities, live and with audience participation. And now, here is your host, Jonathan Levy.
Greetings everyone. I'm really excited to have you all here. I'm in the studio today, and we have a really exciting guest. We're going to get to that in a moment. However, we do need to remember the beginning segment that we're starting every show off with now, which is, the What Are You Printing, Jonathan segment, brought to you by Octo Everywhere. So right now what I'm printing, as you can see in my personal Octo Everywhere dashboard, I actually just finished printing some cool samples because I'm testing a bunch of different materials for an upcoming video. You'll notice Octo Everywhere allows me to actually monitor my Bamboo Lab printers remotely and adds AI failure detection, which you don't have unless you have the X1 Carbon. So that's pretty cool. That printed on the P1S, and I'm printing some desiccant container packages here on one of my A1 minis. And all my other printers are resting because I actually didn't plan on coming into the studio today. Check out Octo Everywhere. You get, I think, 3 free months or a $25 credit. Maybe that's the same thing. Using the link in the description, they're supporters of the show, and I, as you can see, use and recommend their product. On to today's guest, and thank you all so patiently for waiting. Today we're talking to Trevor Townsend. He is the, I believe, co-founder, we'll clarify that, founder or co-founder of Matter and Form. They have created a new line of ultra innovative 3D scanners that we're going to talk about. But he's also just super passionate about 3D imaging and how we can get more things out into the world that we can then 3D print. Trevor, welcome to the show. I hope I did your bio justice here. How are you doing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So, Trevor, I want to get into 3D imaging and scanning, and I have a lot of questions about the scanner that I just unboxed yesterday in anticipation of this. But first, I want to understand your journey. You've come from product development and software. At what point did you kind of become personally interested in 3D printing?
Well, so I mean, it's been a long journey for me and for my co-founder Drew. So Matter and Form is our company. We first got the idea that we could make a scanner back in 2012. And
Oh, wow.
at that time, as you can remember, I'm sure 3D printing was starting to become a well-known thing at that time, and
Yeah.
people were excited about it, and we were excited about it as well. And we had hacked together our own 3D printer, kind of in the style of the time, and we got kind of we saw that there was this flip side to the object, the physical creation, which is you have to have something to create. You have to have a 3D file, and there were a variety of ways to get that, but we felt that it would be really cool if you could just scan your thing and then you'd have the file and then you could print it. And
that's the dream, right?
So it is, right? It's exactly it. And it's funny, it was a dream that was shared by a lot of people. And so there was a lot of excitement when we kind of announced our first scanner. But the journey between, hey, we should build a 3D scanner, and hey, guess what, we're building a 3D scanner, it was some time and some some work on that. And yeah, I mean, our very first prototype was it was kind of awesome. I mean, it was a very fun time, right? You think about the classic story of someone doing a tech startup, right? And it's like they were in the garage, right? And there's tools and equipment all over the place, and it's typically a couple of guys, and they're like they're working 15 hours a day, and they're there 7 days a week, and they're obsessed. And that's a fairly accurate assessment of the situation for us as well. We our first prototype was just a webcam, a laser pointer that you got at like the convenience store, like one of those laser pointers that you use to play with your cat. We had one of those, and we wrote the software, or more accurately, Drew wrote the software in Adobe Flash,
Wow.
because that was the programming language that he knew at the time. And he's like, okay, can I triangulate this laser dot on this object by and turning the object? Can I make it triangulate? And so he tried it out, and he could. And we're like, okay, now let's make it a laser line. And so
Okay.
can we triangulate that? And we could. And then, we started writing the software in a better language. We started writing it in C# and using C++. And so for me, the coolest, I mean, it's been such an incredible journey, and it's been like, just, I know that you've founded and run a couple of businesses, perhaps more
Mhm.
than a couple. There's always the ups and downs, and there have been
Yes.
plenty of hard times. Don't get me wrong, but no one wants to hear about the hard times. They want to hear about how much fun it was, and it
Right.
was a lot of fun. And I mean, my background, like you mentioned, it was like I was a computer programmer, business analyst, a project manager, kind of prior to doing this, and this product, this business with Drew, has just been an incredible opportunity for growth for both of us to learn, a whole bunch of new skills. So my abilities as a programmer just, and his as well, just went exponential over the first years, or over the years of writing our product, building our product. I actually stepped away from the technical aspects of the scanner, of the business, I about 4 or 5 years ago, to focus
Okay.
more on the business side of things. And so even that has been, a huge learning journey. If you had told me 20 years ago that I was going to stop being the technical guy and get into being the sales guy, I'd have thought you were crazy, because I was,
Right.
kind of introverted. But yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah. I don't know. Did that answer your question? I mean, we just wanted to
It did
build a
answer my
scanner.
question.
We thought we could do it. We tried it out in an extremely duct tape way, which is,
Yeah.
we tend to take that when we have an idea, you know, it's you want to get to an answer. Can this be done as
Yeah.
quickly as you can, right? So, we look at that, as we call that, like the duct tape solution. So it's like,
Sure.
can we hack something together that either proves or disproves that this idea is going to work? And that's exactly what we did. We managed to make that like laser pointer scanner in maybe a few weeks, and then we put together our first prototypical, the scanner that would look like the one we were going to launch, and we launched it on a crowdfund, and then that's a whole other story. But I'll leave it there
Yeah.
for now.
Hold on. You've
And
already prompted
yeah,
so many exciting questions. And the first one is, it sounds like you guys started literally from first principles. And a lot of times I think these days when you think about a hardware startup, everything's kind of been done before, and it's not starting with a camera and a laser pointer. So my question is, was that because you guys had different ideas of the way that it should be done, or is it because it was so early that there was no one else doing it? Like, why start with a camera and a laser pointer instead of the things we know now, like structured light or
oh yeah,
infrared, or.
yeah. No, I mean, okay. So the answer is yes. All of that. We, as I said, we learned a lot over the years, and the monumental amount of things that we just didn't know when we started, was the monumental amount was monumental. Like, we just didn't. There was so much that we didn't know, and but we were very enthusiastic, reasonably intelligent people. We like to figure things out. And we were fortunate, in some things, as time passed, we were able to find people that could help and answer questions. But like, in terms of like the first beginning, we didn't know, we knew some 3D mathematics, geometry, right?
Okay.
We had this idea, like, yeah, I mean, we had seen there weren't that many other scanners on the market at that time, and this is something that I want to chat about as well. Kind of the overall situation at the time was very much like 3D printing. It was an established technology,
Right.
but for industry and high budget items, and big, yeah, it was like that. And the first 3D printers, kind of re-asked the question and say, why does it have to be just that price point? Why does it have to be just industry? Why can't this
Right.
technology be cheap and accessible to everyone? And so we thought exactly the same thing with 3D scanning. I mean, at its core, the one that we looked at a lot back then was the Next engine, and it had been around for at least 10 years at that point.
Oh, wow.
And it was a laser line, and it had a turntable, and the laser line kind of moved in a kind of along, I guess, the Z axis, and
Mm-hmm.
we're like, okay, well, clearly this can be done. Let's think about how they might be doing that and give it a try. We'll just try it with the equipment that we have to hand. So
Okay.
laser pointer and little turntable that we basically just 3D printed. So yeah,
So kind of
yeah,
like it's being done, but it's so expensive. What if we kind of reinvented the wheel from first principles?
exactly.
Okay,
Why does
interesting.
this thing have to cost? I don't know. It was maybe $5,000-6,000. I mean, okay, it had a nice case, and the build quality on that scanner was very nice, but
Yeah.
maybe we could do a less expensive build quality. We could do something,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, we were just looking at the components that were being used to make 3D printers, right? And they weren't necessarily that expensive. So why don't we
Right.
just use those components and write the software? And then this thing, and when we launched it on Kickstarter, or Indiegogo at the time, I think the first price was like $350. And
Oh, wow.
it's funny. Here's a fun story for you. Uh, Bree Pettis from MakerBot reached out to us during our Kickstarter and said, "Hey, very nice guy. He's very encouraging, but he's like, hey, you might want to think about raising your price a little." And because he was aware, because he was further down the road of building
Right.
hardware, that there's more to the cost structure for building a product than just the material cost. And we were
Yes.
still, kind of ignorant of that. And so he was kind of trying to help us out. And yeah, as the Kickstarter progressed, and then after the Kickstarter and time passed, we're like, oh yeah, actually we do need to raise the price slightly. So we started at $350, and ultimately I think that scanner ended up at $499, $500
Wow.
thereabouts. So not terribly hugely more expensive, but a little bit more. But yeah,
Yeah. And then I guess you
but
guys have gone up market. Because
yes.
I don't like to ask hardball questions, but the next question I was gonna
That's
ask
fine.
was gonna be this one's like 3,400 Canadian or something. I don't know what that is in US. So obviously maybe the strategy has shifted, or maybe just tell me about that.
So yeah, that's a great question, and I don't mind. It's not that hard of a question. I mean, if I'm not much of a CEO if I can't explain what our pricing
Sure.
structure is.
But it's kind of
So it's
I
okay.
guess maybe hardball question isn't the right answer. Confrontational questions. Like, wait a minute, you just said you wanted to make a cheaper scanner, but now your scanner's three
That's right.
grand. I don't know. It seems confrontational, but I do want to understand because clearly,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's a really good question. So why have we done that? There's a few reasons for it, and I think if you look at the difference between the 3D scanning market today and the 3D scanning market in 2013 when we launched our
Mhm.
first scanner, uh, they are very different, and
Yes.
it's not an exaggeration, and it's actually a kind of a point of pride for us, for Matter and Form as a company, that we brought the first low cost 3D scanner into the market. We were the
Really
very
cool.
first ones. MakerBot actually had a scanner that came out for a while that was roughly the same price, but they
Okay.
discontinued it after a year or so. It wasn't really a thing
Right.
for them. They really stuck to printing. But we were it. We were the first scanner that was cheap, and
Wow.
it was a big deal. And um, we brought out our scanner, and the problem with being first in a market is that a lot of people have expectations about what this technology can do, and some of
Yeah.
them are having those expectations from a place of experience, and some of them are having those expectations from a place of hope and dreams. And frankly, for us, we were kind of the hope and dreams crowd, to be honest, when we started. And so I totally understand that, but there was expectations that this stuff, that scanner in particular, could perform at a level that, basically no scanners could perform at. And, it had its issues, but it was good for what it was. It's a fixed
Right.
position laser scanner. The components were very inexpensive, and it did a good job. It had its limitations, there's no
Yeah.
question, but if you had some experience with 3D scanners, and we had talked to people who did, they were generally impressed by the quality of the scan that our old scanner could make. We thought people would like it, and a lot of people did like it. But then a lot of
Yeah.
people, they had this idea that 3D scanning was like, it's going to stick it on the scanner no matter what it is, and it's going to come out with this pristine 3D model that you can just dump in your printer and make it. It's like a
If only it
photocopier.
were
It's
so
going to be
simple,
perfect,
right?
Yeah, and
That's what
I
I
know
thought
it's
when I got my first
yeah.
scanner, and it was not that way.
No, unfortunately it's not. Now I will say that 3 is quite a bit closer to that than
So
than
yeah,
our
I
first
haven't gotten
scanner.
it. I haven't gotten it going yet. We're gonna work on that after
Well,
the live stream. But I've
but
noticed. Sorry, let me finish. Let me let you
yeah, go
finish
ahead.
the thought.
Well, I'm giving you a very long answer, but it's sort of the historical context is kind of required to explain why is the new
Sure.
scanner more expensive. So the difference between that time and this time is in 2020, thereabouts 2019, 2020, there were a bunch of new products that came onto the market. And if you go to Amazon, you do 3D, you search for 3D scanner on Google, and it's just, must be, I don't know, 100, 200 different scanners.
Yeah.
And they are, essentially indistinguishable from each other.
Sure.
So it's a real challenge right now to kind of differentiate yourself. And we've made a good attempt, and we have some really good features in 3 that differentiate
Right.
us from a lot of the other machines on the market. But if you look at the pricing, there are literally dozens of machines in the less than $1,000 range, and they're just from our perspective, it didn't make sense to just add one more into that
It's a
group.
race to the bottom on some level.
It's a
And
race to the
also,
bottom.
I feel like on some level, in all my years of going to business school and all that, they never talked about this idea, but I've thought about it for many years. That like you kind of have to earn the right to be mid-market, in the sense that when you're a new entrant, you need to prove yourself, unless you're venture backed with bajillions of dollars like Bamboo Lab, and then you can right out the gate be mid-market. But if you're a startup, look at like Form Labs, right? You work your way up to the point where you're like, okay, now we can make a mid-market product. We don't need to compete on price. We don't need to compete on all these other things. And I think that's definitely true, right? Again, if you're government backed like a Tesla, or venture backed like a Bamboo Lab, it's different. But if you're starting out, you kind of need to work your way up to the point where you can say, hey, we've got more experience than most of the people coming into the market today. We can be the mid-market product, and let someone else come up through the ranks. So I don't know. That's my pontificating on business strategy. I do want to ask you, because I had this experience. So I've had 3D scanners for a few years now, maybe 3. And I go through a lot of them. Not that I use them that much. It's just they get sent over a lot. And I was at 3D Maker Pro's booth. They flew me to Formnext, so thank you to them. And for 4 days, I was like using their scanner, doing demos for them on, was it the Moose or the Seal? And I thought, based on what I knew from 3D scanners a year ago, as I'm using it for days, that it was like a $700, $800, $900 scanner. And then I get home to write my roundup video, and I discover it's on sale for $279 with no accessories, or $399 with the turntable and the tripod and the what? And it was good. I mean, it was pretty good. So I want to understand, like, yeah, how do you compete with that? Because I didn't think we were gonna get there that fast. And
So
it's pretty good. It's pretty
yeah,
decent. It's
no,
better than any scanner that I had used up until that point.
wow. Okay. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
yeah,
haven't
I
used
think
yours yet, so
that's okay. Yeah, no, I've heard good things about the Moose and the Seal, to be honest.
yeah.
I think they're, honestly, looking across the range of 3D scanners available on the market today, from all of them, the 3D Maker Pro, the Shining 3D, the Rebo Points,
Yep.
the Crealities, they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
The
And they
market in
weren't like
general.
a year ago or like a year and a half ago. Something changed
Well, it's the
fast.
software, right? People
Right.
people are getting they're getting the feedback, and I mean, we've had this experience as well. Our approach has always been, we're really software developers making hardware, and there are
Mhm.
kind of there's two schools here. There aren't really any. There are 3D scanning companies that are hardware companies that make
Right.
software, and then there's 3D scanning companies like us that are software companies that make hardware. And
Right.
the software is the thing that makes them usable or not. And
Yeah.
so really it is a race to the bottom. And, when you're talking about prices that are less than $300, there are structural things that need to be in place to make that a profitable business for
Sure.
a company. And those
Sure.
sorts of structural things are things like you have to have an extremely inexpensive workforce. You
Right.
have to have a huge amount of market penetration. You have to have ideally your own factory. So you have control over the costs of building all of that hardware.
Right.
Um, yeah.
And
And
still,
so,
no one is promising that they're running it profitably. I mean, they could be venture
well,
backed, and so many companies are now.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to the profitability of our
Sure.
competitors. I mean, we do okay. There have been some lean years for sure,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, our strategy and the offering that we have with three, the reason that we're pricing it higher is there's a few of them. I mean, first of all, you're getting the 11 years of experience we have
Right.
in building 3D scanning software and hardware. But the software, as I said, is the key. Um, that has been informed by a decade of user feedback. We are our approach is always users experience first, and that if you look at some of the reviews that we've had, and you look at the feedback on our website, we have feedback from our customers, and it's real feedback. We
Yeah. Yeah. Of
reached out
course.
to people that either supported us on our Kickstarter for 3, or who bought the scanner afterwards, and asked them to do, it's a little widget for Shopify. They can submit a review. They're talking about using scanners like Artec. They're talking about using scanners, like Faro, and they're
Right.
comparing us, not just, they're comparing us favorably. They're comparing us as superior.
That's wild.
It's just in circumstances.
So
So like,
yeah, and I guess I meant the question more from a business strategy perspective, and I see you kind of got that. It sounds to me like you guys are kind of you've worked your way into the prosumer and let a lot of these other companies who are making names for themselves or have a cheaper labor force take up the pure consumer play. And that's one of the
mhm.
questions I wanted to ask as you were talking. You mentioned starting the company with such excitement of like people with 3D printers will be able to pick up the scanner and scan. And I wonder, after 11 years, has that vision changed for you? Do you still think that a 3D scanner, excuse me, do you think that a 3D scanner is something that is going to be pick up an object you want to scan it and print it? Or do you now see it as more of a tool for businesses, for reference geometry? What has 11 years taught you about who you need to put your product in the hands of?
Yeah, man, that's the question. And it's a bit of a lament. It's a bit of a lament for me, that
Mm,
question, because how do I explain it? So every conversation that I've ever had for the last 11 years with someone who's new to this world, who doesn't
sure.
know what 3D scanning is, they ask me the same question, which is, well, they ask, what do you do? I say, well, I make 3D scanners. It's like, oh, well, what does that do? And I explain what it does, and they go, well, what would I use that for? And so there's two groups of people in the world. There are the people who know what 3D scanners are for and understand that they are for a wide range of things.
Yeah.
There's the people in their garage who want to 3D print it, scan something to print it. There are engineers who need to make, extremely accurate measurements of mechanical parts. I think these days the easiest one to tell people about it is dentistry. You go to the dentist's office and they pull out the wand and they scan your teeth. Everyone or many people have had that experience now, so they have something real world that they can relate to.
Okay.
If they don't know that one necessarily, I might say, look, a 3D scanner is basically a ruler. So if you need to measure something, you get out your ruler and you measure it, right? A 3D scanner simply is a significantly more sophisticated ruler. It's still measuring an object, but it isn't limited by the way that, a ruler is, where if you're trying to measure something that's curved or kind of bends around, it's not going to be able to bend with that. So it's a measurement tool. So anyone who needs to measure something can use the scanner. But it's still print, it's still, I have this thing, I want to replicate it, going to scan it, going to print it. That's still part of it. But then there's, what we learned over the 11 years is that there is just a huge range of different use cases for scanning. And
that's
one of the reasons that 3 is what it is. And so, it has a few features to enable all of far more of these use cases than some of the other scanners. So it has these focusing cameras. So it's the only scanner in the world that has software focused cameras, right? You focus the camera the way you would focus your cell phone. You point at the thing on the screen, you click that, and then it focuses at that point. That is hugely, hugely powerful feature, because it lets you scan things like, I've got my little Canadian $1 coin here. The details on this are incredibly small. And, I was scanning a PCB, scanning this the other day. And, the tiny little, like lines, the electrical lines on this, like some of those are coming through on the scan. And then certainly the fastening points for the chips, they're coming through on the scan. But at the same time, you can refocus the camera and, scan like a car engine. So you've got this like wide range of capability that remains extremely accurate. We're looking at 33 micron accuracy at its closest range, up to around 150 at its furthest range. So we wanted, it has these capabilities. So if you're a maker, you can use it for that. If you're an engineer and you need to measure something accurately, you can use it for that. And then, because the software is built into the scanner, we have a big interest in the education market, particularly, middle school, high school, and university. But, if you've ever been in a middle school or a high school, they don't necessarily typically have gaming rigs for computers for the students. They have Chromebooks. So, we also wanted those people, those students, those teachers, those classrooms to have something that integrates into their classroom that isn't going to, require a computer that's twice as expensive as the scanner.
Yeah, I guess that's an important point here, is that we should point out to people who haven't had the experience of playing with it. This thing sets up a Wi-Fi, just for reference here, it sets up a Wi-Fi access point, then connects to your network, and it basically acts like a server or a Raspberry Pi. I guess as 3D printer people were used to it. Like, it creates a web page, and that's how you scan with it. It also, I didn't realize until I opened the box, it has a projector in it.
Yes.
Which, if you're listening to the audio, it is now projecting onto my hand. Crazy, weird, interesting feature. How come you decided to do that? Is it just for interacting with the user and giving the user prompts and information? Or does it serve another function, this projector that's now projecting on me?
Well, yes, it does both. The projector, it's a structured light 3D scanner, right? So it has stereo cameras and the structured light projection.
Okay.
But because it's a Wi-Fi enabled device, it needs to tell you information about it when it starts up, so that you know how to connect to it. So yeah, it starts with a hotspot, and then you can connect to the hotspot,
Yep.
connect to its website, which of course the website is on the scanner. It's not on the internet, right?
Right.
It's local to the scanner. You connect to that, and then you can set it up on your Wi-Fi, and then you're good to go. And I mean, I have my scanner connected to my Wi-Fi, and I use it like that all the time. And yeah, it's just very easy. And so if you're, you know, if you're out in the field, wherever the field might be, you have that hotspot. And I was actually at Formnext the other week as well.
Cool.
Too bad I didn't see you there. You know, I was demoing the scanner. I was demoing 3, and I just used the hotspot because I didn't want to connect it to the Wi-Fi of the show. It's, you know, it's incredibly overburdened Wi-Fi. I just used the hotspot.
Cool.
You know, yeah. So yeah, that's what that's all about. But
so I did not realize, and I gotta ask you all the questions because I thought structured light meant something different. But before we do that, I do need to cliffhanger and thank this episode's sponsor, which is PCBWay. You mentioned PCBs before, so it's a kind of natural segue. Just so you guys know, as you probably already know, PCBWay makes awesome PCBs at a super affordable price. They also do sheet metal fabrication, CNC machining, 3D printing, injection molding. They can pretty much do anything. I've had them 3D print tool steel for me. I've had them CNC machine aluminum for me, high carbon steel. They do it all. They have great prices. And right now they have a Christmas sale with up to 50% off. Definitely check that out. Use the link in the description. Their sales are always a crazy extravaganza bonanza. And thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring the episode. So Trevor, when I asked about the projector, I thought maybe I need you to kind of set me straight here. I thought structured light inherently meant that it was using laser, like blue laser or some, like, I didn't realize you could use a normal projector to do structured light. So maybe we should talk about what structured light means, because clearly I don't understand.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, structured light just means that it's light with a pattern, right? That's all it means. So yeah, you could have that as a laser pattern, like a cross-hatched laser pattern. Although that would typically be called a laser scanner, but it's still structured light. It's just, you know, in our case, it's a pattern of gray and white bars that kind of start at a thickness and then have. So it gets from thick and then to thinner. It does it vertically, it does it horizontally, and then it uses the differentiation between all of those images of each pixel. It has different levels of grayscale on all of the pixels, and it uses that information to triangulate. So yeah, it's just structured light simply just means a pattern of light. And so how you generate that pattern doesn't matter.
I see. So it's about having a known pattern of light. And then when you say triangulate, you're obviously not talking about what I would kind of consider, I don't know which is X, Y, and Z, but let's just say not in this dimension, but rather understanding depth. Because understanding, I guess, in this dimension is that a camera can do that. Any camera does that, right? Or am I way off again?
No, you're not off. It's not quite. I mean, you're absolutely right, but it is a little bit more complicated than just like, you know, you've got a 1280 by 960 image or whatever it is. So, you know, 4K image. And it's like this pixel's at, you know, 1,287 by 3,499. And then you have to calculate the Z value. It's not quite that straightforward. There's a calibration process, which we do in the factory to calibrate the cameras and to understand, you know, their sort of what is known as their intrinsic and their extrinsic properties. And then that information is used along with the light structuring on the pixels to triangulate to calculate, you know, X, Y, and Z.
For each individual feature, which is lit up in a very specific way. In a known pattern. It's crazy. As you said, you mentioned earlier, you know, you guys understood coming into this, the math, the three-dimensional
Some of it,
math.
yeah.
And
some of it. We learned a lot more along the way.
And it sounds like, really, I understand why now you say that this is very much a software company that makes hardware. because I can only imagine the amount of mathematics that needs to be done. And that's all handled, processed on the device, or it's also using my computer's processor in the browser to do that?
It's just on the device. It's just on the device.
Crazy. Can you tell us how
And
much does that require? A lot of processing power, or is that a negligible part of the kind of hardware cost?
uh, no, it requires a fair amount of processing power. And
Interesting.
so there are trade-offs here, right? So as I said, we wanted to put it on the device to save, you know, it's a very common story where someone said, "Oh, I'm going to buy this scanner. It's $900. This is
Yeah.
awesome." And they get it home and then they look at the specs of what's required to run it. And it's like, oh, I have to go
Right.
buy a new computer. It's going to cost me $2,500. So,
Yeah.
the total cost, if I'm going to business on this for a second, the total cost of ownership is, it's like $3,400 for that
Right.
sub $1,000 scanner. So we're trying to avoid that. And, as we're talking about being the middle market machine.
Sure.
We've got there are advantages to that. There are disadvantages to that because for the people that want the $1,000 scanner, we're too expensive. For a
Right.
professional that our scanner can do professional level quality measurement, like metrology level kind of measurement. Um, but a company that's looking to buy a 3D scanner, like say like an engineering company, they have a higher budget and they may not take our scanner as seriously because to them it's cheap.
That's wild.
So there is a bit of a challenge, but leaving that aside, we wanted to make the scanner self-sufficient so that whether you were a high school classroom with a Chromebook or you were a home hobbyist with an old Windows 7 laptop, or you
Yeah.
were an engineering shop that had really great computer, you could use it across the
Yeah.
board. And there's another advantage to this as well, and I don't think this doesn't really get talked about very often, but I think it's really important. Everything is built into 3. So you're good to go. It doesn't matter if there's a new version of Windows next year, or
Yeah.
if some new operating system comes out, or if you prefer to use Linux, or
Right.
if you're a Mac person, you don't have to worry that we're going to have to or the company is going to bring out a Windows a version that's compatible for the next version of Windows, or the next Mac update breaks your scanning software. You got to wait for the company to fix it. You don't have any of those worries with 3. If it's 20 years from now and you pull out the 3 scanner and you boot it up and connect it to Wi-Fi, assuming that Wi-Fi is still a thing in 20 years, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah.
You're still able to use that scanner. So
That's
it's
cool.
going to have, we still support the scanners that we built 11 years ago. Like
Very cool.
we're not. It's always been about making sustainable technology and not throw a $300 technology that you're going to try
Well
out for
said.
6 months and then throw it in the trash
Yeah.
pile and buy the next thing. We wanted to build something that is going to last, that is going to be high quality, that
Yeah.
you can rely on for decades, and that is exactly what you're getting when you get 3.
I have the impression, based on, as we've now seen, my extremely limited understanding of how 3D scanning works. But like, you reminded me not of Elon Musk, because fuck that
Ha!
guy.
Okay.
Recently, I drive a Tesla, yeah, but I bought it before he lost his shit. I don't want to get political, but you remind me not of him, but you remind me of Tesla in that the 2016 Model S is still getting all the same upgrades, and it's because the cameras are good enough, the processor's good enough, the tech doesn't really change. I mean, like the batteries have gotten a lot better since 2016, but besides that, the tech doesn't change enough to where you need to buy a new car, and people don't typically people drive their Teslas till the wheels fall off. Is that the same here? I mean, it sounds like the cameras are good enough, the light source is good enough, there's clearly enough processing power today. It sounds like you'll be able to kind of push software updates for decades, as you said. And I mean, do you envision any hardware upgrades coming out, any availability of new technologies to where you're like, oh, that's what's going to be in the 4th scanner?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Yes to all of that. I mean, uh, there, we, oh gosh, we've pushed. so many software updates. So we finally started shipping 3 in July of this year. So we've been shipping since then. And in the time frame between then and now, I mean, we must have pushed, I don't know, 15 software
Wow.
updates, something like that, maybe more. Like we are constantly, we're building new features, we're fixing bugs, we're addressing, usability issues. So I did a live unboxing. I was watching Grant from 3D Musketeers a couple of weeks ago do a live unboxing of 3. High pressure. I mean, I was in the chat. It was high pressure though, because he'd never used it before. And, I'm watching him use it, and, he got a good result, but he ran into some problems along the way. And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. So we need to address this, and we need to address this, and we need to address this, because I'm watching this guy who's, he knows about 3D scanning. He's running into certain usability issues that we hadn't considered. And so we got to fix those. So the fixes for those that was 2-3 weeks ago. They're all out now. Like, we've released software to fix all of that. They weren't huge things, but they're just like little pieces that like affect the usability. But yeah, I mean, we're intending to continue. We've got ideas for a lot of good features for the scanner for the coming months and years, all of which we plan to put into the scanner. Some really cool stuff. And I mean, first of all, like measurement tools, heat map discrepancy tools. The scanner is extremely good at turntable scanning for, tiny to medium-sized objects. You can scan really large objects with it as well. But, and I say this to customers if they come and say, look, I'm looking at this scanner and I'm looking at 3, which one should I buy? And I'm like, well, what is it you're scanning? Are you scanning, some tiny things, medium-sized things, or are you constantly scanning motorcycles? Yeah. If you're constantly scanning motorcycles, you're going to be better off getting a different scanner if you need to capture the entire thing, because the work process today with 3, it's fairly laborious to scan something that large. But we have ideas that how we can make that not only just easier for doing it with 3, but arguably that it'll be easier to do it with 3 as a stationary scanner than it would be with a handheld scanner, because you don't have to worry about the distance and constantly keeping it. You don't have to watch it and watch the screen and have the right distance. You're not losing tracking. So we have some ideas to make that happen as well.
Wow.
So, and then there's some more ideas as well. So we've got a lot of ideas about how we can improve the scanner, and all of this. If you buy 3, you're going to get all of that. There's no software licensing. We just push the update. You get the notification that there's an update. You install it. You're good to go.
So it's strictly stationary, though. Like, there's no plan to roll out a handheld software update where I can move it, and like, that's not a possibility.
Not at present, no.
Okay.
Not at present, no. It's intended to stay as stationary. A version 2 of 3 in next year, or we'll see. Maybe there is a better SoC that we can put into the scanner that will make it faster. It does have some processing time depending on the settings that you choose for doing your scan. It can take, up to like 5 minutes to process certain things. Like if you've got 75 scans that you are aligning together, that can take a few minutes to process on the scanner. If it had a slightly more powerful SoC, then maybe it could go a little faster. There is no one technology that is, going to solve every problem for every person. And, 3 has certain limitations. Some of our more advanced users, the people who are engineers who have really powerful computers, would kind of, I think, prefer if they could actually have desktop software, because then they would take advantage of the fact that they have all this power. Whereas right now, of course, they can't. But, you can't do everything for everyone. And we felt that the longevity of the software, the longevity of the machine, by keeping the software on the machine, outweighed, the short-term gains of having a Windows package that would go faster because you have a good computer.
I gotcha. So speaking of kind of challenges that the technology presents or is presented by, Andrew had a good question that I've been thinking about as we're speaking. Copyright. Like, how do you, we're in a world where there have been discussions about like limiting what you can 3D print, and what happens if someone wants to use 3 for nefarious purposes of copyright violation. Is there is that a discussion in your industry? Is there anything that can be done, or is it kind of like, music piracy? Like if I can play the music, there's always going to be a way for someone to figure out a way to capture that. Is that a concern even?
I mean, yeah, it is a concern. We actually have in our, terms of service
Mm,
in the software that you are, you know, agreeing to not duplicate copyrighted items.
mhm.
Items where there is an ownership of intellectual property. You
Right.
know, uh, that is obviously to protect us against people blaming us for people,
Sure.
copying things they shouldn't. But it is a discussion in the industry to a certain extent. I we For a while we had a partner in the company that was actually a lawyer, and he was very interested in this topic, and he spoke about it in a few different conferences uh, back back in the time when he was with us. Um, and it was definitely a discussion, and you know, particularly in the early days when there was a lot of marketing hype around this technology, where it's like, you can print anything, anything, and you can't really print anything. It's like you could print yourself a new set of lungs. It's like, no, not really.
No.
So now that things have kind of calmed down a bit and people have a better understanding of what you can and can't do with this technology, I don't think it's quite as hot a topic. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't really have this conversation with people that often. Um, you know, we're going to have. I'm talking to a well-known um, YouTube channel that makes that talks about gaming miniatures, like Games Workshop miniatures, right?
Yeah.
And they had an idea to scan some miniatures, and I'm fine with that. But I'm also like, you probably do not want to scan Games Workshop miniatures, because Games Workshop are very protective of their intellectual property, and
Right.
at worst you're gonna, or at best you're just gonna have to take down the video, and at worst maybe they're gonna come after you. I don't know, but it is a
Yeah.
conversation. But I mean, it's an old conversation. It's a new technology, but an old conversation.
Totally.
What's to stop me from photocopying my novel and giving it to my friend,
Exactly.
or
And
taping this song off the radio with my cassette player? Right? It's
exactly.
been going
And
on
what's
forever.
unique here, I think, is that, if you're going to photocopy a textbook, I guess the same argument I'm about to make could be said for that. But in this case, the product or the technology of 3D scanning, it can, and in most cases will be a vehicle for fair use. Meaning, if I want to take inspiration from, let's just use, Morley Kurt's been doing all these like amazing artistic chairs that he 3D prints and saying, don't sue me. And it turns out they're really happy about it, these companies. But let's just say I want to
Mhm.
take inspiration. Artists have always taken inspiration. I want to start from that form. Maybe it's a very popular chair and I want to make a commentary on it, right? It's art. Art is allowed to incorporate other people's art as long as you continually change it. Um, it that's fair use, and I can 3D
Mhm.
scan it. And as long as I don't publish the model as is and I change it, and maybe I want to make a commentary on consumerism by 3D scanning that chair and then making my own remix, that's fair use. And so, if at the software level we limit that, then we're limiting fair use.
Sure, sure.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's a tool, right? It's a tool,
right?
and any tool can be used for good purposes or bad purposes.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, the fair use argument is a great one. I mean, my wife is actually an entertainment lawyer.
Oh, no kidding.
She deals with this sort of thing quite a lot, making sure that especially film properties, like anything that's going to be broadcast, um, has cleared anything at all that might be a question around this sort of thing. I mean, it's a well discussed legal concept for sure, and
Right.
absolutely, fair use is a huge part of that. Um, and I think a lot of the time, it will come down to a case by case decision. It won't, obviously not everything goes to court, but like
Right.
whether or not you can defend your copy of a thing, it really depends on what that copy looks like, what you did with it, and who you're, presenting it to.
Right. And as Andrew just brought up, like, is that thing even copyrightable? He brought up in the chat here the battle between Lotus and Ferrari. Can you copyright a specific shape? Or I think a lot about Lamborghini. All their models use this kind of Y shape, right? They've moved on from the hexagons and they use these Y-shaped lights and Y-shaped accoutrements. And it's like, they would love to copyright that. I'm not sure you can copyright a certain angle of a Y shape.
So, I mean, is copyright, and then there's design patenting, right? So we have a design patent on 3. We have a few of them because we really liked the way it was designed, and we wanted to protect that. And I would expect that it's also contextual. So, right. The shape of the headlight within, it's not just the shape, it's the shape of this headlight within this context of the hood and the front of the car.
Mm-hmm.
That all of that kind of comes into play when you're trying to set up a design patent. Sure. For example, like the headlights on a Porsche, right? They have they've looked like that since, the earliest days. Everybody recognizes the front of a Porsche. It's very, very iconic design. I don't know for certain, but I certainly would expect they have a design patent on that idea. To a certain extent.
Certainly does, with the double circles and kidney. The kidney grill is a trademark.
Right.
I think it's a trademark. Either a patent.
It might be, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there are certain elements I used to, in a past life, as you mentioned, I've had a lot of businesses. Most of them didn't work. Some of them did. But in a past life, I upgraded BMWs, and there are certain components that you could just never put a double grill in any other car. I mean, unless it was vastly different. Any double grill, you can't go anywhere near. There are parts that are no longer covered, right? So there's something called the Hofmeister kink in the C-pillar of a car, where the pillar doesn't, it's actually exactly like this. It goes down, kinks, and then goes down, as opposed to being like that. If you notice, pretty much every car now has a Hofmeister kink. That used to be either trademarked or patented or whatever it is. And now it's not. And now everyone does it. So if you look at like Japanese cars from the 1970s, the back window looks like that. It's not very aesthetic. Now it looks like that.
It's rounded. Interesting.
Trevor, I want to change gears, and I want to make sure to ask you about 3D printing before we come to a close, because we didn't get a chance to talk too much about it. What are you personally 3D printing, or what are you guys 3D printing at Matter and Form these days? And how does 3D printing play a role in your life today?
Well, I mean, we have a shop that we have some printers in, and I'm going to be honest, I can't remember which ones we have.
Oh my gosh.
I personally don't do a lot of printing,
Okay.
but I know that, Drew certainly does, specifically when we're in the prototyping phase of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a lot of personal projects that he likes to work on as well that involve printing. During the prototyping phase for 3, we did a lot of printing for testing parts, the casing, the interior structure of all the parts that are going into it. And there's a lot of technology packed into a very small space in the scanner. So like printing out the shapes of those technologies to see the fit within the scanner. That sort of approach. I know that we have a couple of very inexpensive but incredibly accurate, amazing resin printers.
Oh, I bet.
In the shop. And Drew and I were chatting the other day, actually, and he's like, we should get a Bamboo Labs printer. I mean, everyone is talking about the Bamboo Labs printers these days.
Yeah.
we're considering there's a company here in Toronto called Mosaic Manufacturing.
Yeah.
They make a wonderful 3D printer called the Element. We're thinking about maybe getting one of those as well, because it
That's
has
probably massively overkill for prototyping, though. Like,
yeah, maybe, but I think we would use it for more than just prototyping.
okay, I was gonna say, if you guys are gonna be maybe printing some components of the product, that would make sense.
Yeah, then it would be great. Yeah, Mosaic are really going in a manufacturing kind of direction as opposed to prototyping. So maybe it's not really a prototyping machine anymore, but definitely if you're looking to do manufacturing, then that would be to manufacture at scale some components for your product. Then Mosaics would be a good thing. But yeah, those are the sorts of things. I mean, I've in my time I've printed. We used to send out these like a little rubber duck, and before that it was a little rubber frog with our first scanners, and so it was a classic thing to scan the duck or the frog and then to 3D print the duck or the frog. My daughter has a lot of these 3D prints. She really likes them.
Yeah. That reminds me of Big Tree Tech. They send a rubber duck with every product. So you guys probably want to stick to the frog, talking about brand differentiation. Trevor, where can people learn more and reach out to you if they have questions? I think we have a link in the description, but give us all the info.
Yeah, I mean, the best places are our website. It's matterandform.net. And there's lots of information there about our new scanner. And there's a chat feature there. You can ask us questions if you have them. You can also contact us through the website, and it goes to email. And plenty of ways to get in touch with us from our website.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It was an absolute blast. I always love to geek out on the kind of business strategy, put on my old MBA hat and learn a little bit about companies actually making it work in this highly competitive industry. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. And I'll take us out, and then we can play around with this scanner if you have a few more minutes. I'm really excited.
Absolutely.
After this conversation, I actually have some stuff that Nadir needs scanned for me for my tool changer build. So awesome. I will take us out, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infill Podcast. For show notes or links to anything mentioned in today's episode, visit thenextlayer.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you're listening, or click the like button to let us know. And consider subscribing to The Next Layer on YouTube so you can tune in live and participate in the next conversation. We'll see you on The Next Layer.